What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to another Pay-Per-Viewpoint edition of the Smark Moment Smack Talk podcast. I am your host, as always, Tony Mango, and it is time for us to talk about AEW Revolution 2025, which just ended a few minutes ago. So, of course, we're going to break down everything that happened on the show, all the good, all the bad, all the results of all the matches, anything else that you need to know. My overall thoughts about it, reviewing everything, all that good stuff. And of course, it's not just about what I have to say, it's also about what you have to say. So if you are listening to the live chat it up during there. If you are after the fact, then there are so many different ways that you can let us know what your thoughts are. Of course, if you're on Facebook or Twitter, you could send up some kind of a post there. If you are on the page on smarkandmomo.com, you could always leave a comment there. If you're on something like Amazon Music or Spotify or iTunes or whatever it might be, and people don't say iTunes anymore, Apple Podcasts, then, I always recommend head on over to YouTube and leave your comments below on there. There's the Discord server, though. If you are not a big YouTuber and you want to be on the Discord channels, it's an open invite, so go ahead and do that whenever you want to. But if you are on YouTube, then also make sure that you help us out a little bit here. Hit the like button on this video. Make sure you ring that notification bell. Get those email alerts set up. Make sure you are subscribed to this channel. If you want to toss a little spare change our way and help us keep the lights on, especially when things change in a month or so and we are not able to do the podcast for free on Skype anymore, I'm going to have to figure out a way to continue to do this. So if you want to make sure that we do, the thanks button is a great way to just donate a little spare change directly. You could also do the super chats if you are live for that. If you want to pick up the different tiers that you see on Patreon or on YouTube, like the channel membership side of things, even $1 a month is great. $5 and up gives you App Loud forgiveness and the early advanced things whenever we record something in advance. The Darkcast tier, you get special podcasts that you can only listen to on that tier, and so on and so forth. Pick your poison tier is the best thing that you can do. Redbubble and TeePublic is where you get your merchandise too. Keep that in mind. Also, before we get too deep into this, I want to remind everybody about the Smark Madness tournament that's going on right now, where you can vote on who you think John Cena's best rival of all time was. We are still on round 1 right now, but I'm going to switch that over on either Tuesday night or Wednesday. Kind of depends on just how busy everything is. So get your votes in while you can and tell us who you think were the best opponents that John Cena's ever had. So with the pay-per-view-point side of, this whole podcast, the whole point that we're doing it, there's a lot to break down on this pay-per-view. To be perfectly honest, I was going into this kind of thinking that I wasn't going to pay much attention to it. I'm very burned out in a lot of different ways and a lot of different things. And I had some other stuff I was dealing with during the 0 hour where I was just kind of like, I don't know if I really am sucked into this, and they're going to need to suck me in. They eventually did. This was overall a very good pay-per-view, and I'm sure that Rob and Callum will echo a lot of the positives that I am going to say. I'm sure they'll have their opinions that might differ as well, too. I'll try to get their opinions about this maybe somewhere like in the hot tags or something, depending on when those guys are able to record and we're able to do things. But if you're worried that this is going to be one of those AEW pay-per-views where I crap all over it and I say that it's just a series of matches and none of it matters and whatever like that, that's not going to be the case. Now, I will say that I assume that some people are going to say that they're higher up on some matches than I was, but hey, to each their own. That's perfectly fine. But there were so many different things that actually happened during the show. And I think that by and large, this could end up being the best pay-per-view of the year for AEW. I'm going to, hope that they continue to just one-up it over and over again. But if this ends up being, at the end of the year, the one that gets the most votes for best pay-per-view of the year, I wouldn't be all that shocked. So the 0 hours, the first thing to start off with, Commander and Hologram beat Blake Christian and Lee Johnson. For people that watch Ring of Honor, when did Blake Christian start referring to himself as Vanilla Baby and having ice cream on his entrance video and all? That took me by surprise because it's been a while since I've seen ROH, so I don't know if this has been going on for months and I'm just, completely not privy to it, or if this was something that's like pretty brand new or something. I was a little confused about that, but fine enough match on that front. Daniel Garcia and the Undisputed Kingdom win their 8-man tag. Garcia wins by submission and has his like eyes locked on Adam Cole. So there's going to be something in the future going on with those guys. It's weird that that's happening at the same time as multiple other feuds, and everything's just kind of layered, but in a way that, to a certain extent, I kind of feel like, man, maybe you could just go for the trios titles or something. That's fine enough as was, though. The third match on the 0 Hour didn't actually happen. That was supposed to be the ROH World Championship match with Chris Jericho defending against Gravity. Now, what didn't happen with there is the match didn't even start because the Learning Tree just started to attack Gravity, and Gravity's mother and sister were ringside. So, of course, they're watching on in horror. Bandito comes out, tries to help out, and it all ends up breaking down with Jericho snatching Gravity's luchador mask, which, of course, if you know anything about luchadors, that's like the ultimate sign of disrespect. You don't do that. You know, it's a fake thing. It's kayfabe. They didn't do it like for real. They just piss him off. Like, it's a story. It's an angle. But that's, a big loaded heel move to do. So the Bandito family basically just trying to cover up Gravity was where this went. And that means that the feud between Bandito and Jericho, of course, takes a little notch forward, and they're going to end up having a match at some point for that ROH World title that'll end up being potentially Bandito winning the belt. I don't know for sure. I still think that Powerhouse Hobbs has a good chance of being the next in line, but they didn't do anything with Hobbs and them tonight. So Hobbs did something else instead, which I don't really know why he did, but maybe I'm missing something from some other TV show that maybe I'm like, oh, if you would have watched Collision this week, it would have made perfect sense. I don't know. So that was the fourth match, and the final match for the 0 Hour was Big Boom AJ with Big Justice and the Rizzler, and the Conglomeration's Mark Briscoe and Orange Cassidy against Johnny TV and MXM Collection. Hey, I said it right for the first time without just having to correct myself. Oh yeah, man. I always say XMM or something. MXM Collection, Mansoor and Mason Madden, of course, playing around, doing a lot of this was like the clown segment. I mentioned that it was like sending the clowns before or so. All sorts of shenanigans during this. You had Taya Valkyrie making out with Johnny TV. You had some interference from Harley Cameron in here, and they reached a point where, first things first, I should say, the Rizzler came out dressed up as Orange Cassidy, so that was like his big moment. Big Boom AJ, of course, was like, a focal point when it comes to this whole thing. That's the whole point of him being in there. And they decided to give a spot to Big Justice where he, with a little bit of help from like Mansoor being on the ring ropes, he gave him a powerbomb. So, he got a little bit of retribution for Mansoor throwing his cookie down. This sounds ridiculous, and it is. But, they hammed it up, and, you got what you wanted out of it when it comes to that. What I was confused about, though, and somebody can fill me in if this is something that's been built up or if it was as chaotic and just random as it seemed like it was. You set up the cookie thing, okay. Mansoor gets taken out by Big Justice. Okay. They pin. Actually, I don't remember who took the pin. Babyfaces win. That's all that matters. And then the Murder Machines come out, and Brian Cage and Lance Archer are like circling the ring, and Powerhouse Hobbs makes a save. They would think by me saying that he comes out, he beats the two of them down, and then that's the end of it. Well, he gives a spine buster to Mason Madden instead, and Cage and Archer just leave. And then ringside is Adam Devine and Tony Cavallero, I think was his name, from The Righteous Gemstones. I've never heard of this TV show before. And I've seen Adam Devine and other things. I don't think I've seen Tony Cavallero in anything. But yeah, I'm probably in something. Never watched Workaholics, for anybody that's wondering. So they come into the ring and they do a double choke slam on Mansoor and the 0 Hour. I guess it was just a means to like get a little bit of product placement in there and all. But then again, that was a lot of tonight. Like they kept harping on the Queen of the Ring movie in multiple different awkward segments. So I'm not going to bother to, run them down throughout the whole thing, but a lot of promotion for Queen of the Ring. And most of it was, guys, this is only in the theaters for a few days. Please go check it out and watch it in theaters, which was a little bit surprising for me that, it's only in theaters for a few days or so. But the 0 hour overall, I mean, for a free hour of that kind of stuff, I'm sure people watching that, I don't think that anybody watching that would have decided on a whim to buy the pay-per-view. I don't think anybody's watching this, the Rizzler in the ring and going, I think I need to spend another $50 something. But I think overall entertainment value, most people were probably super happy with the 0 hour. They start off the main card with Hangman Adam Page against MJF. Admittedly, I did not see the vast majority of this match. I was busy dealing with dinner. I was also trying to write up all the stuff from the 0 hour because it was like, okay, well, unfortunately, a bunch of news happened at the end of it, so I didn't have the whole rest of the 0 hour to talk about the other things. So I spent a portion of this match just not being able to do that and just being, pulled in a bunch of different directions. So I can't speak to the quality of it, but it seems like people tended to like it quite a bit. So I defer to you. If you think that I should go back and check this out, let me know, and then I will go back and check the match out. But I kind of have a feeling that I'll probably be able to get the gist of it just by a couple clips, and that it was outclassed by some other things on the night, but that it was still a good segment. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. I don't know. Mercedes Moné retained the AEW TBS Championship over Momo Watanabe. Seems like Watanabe might have been injured during this. I haven't seen any confirmation of exactly what had happened, when it happened, if there's any clarification on her injury or anything. Just a report that said that she had been like helped to the back and possibly injured. So that's something to watch out for. Although at the same time, Watanabe's not an extra, not a regular in AEW. She's just an extra. So for the AEW audience, at the very least, this might not necessarily factor in anything. Watanabe wrestles elsewhere. She's a part of Stardom. So hopefully she's not actually like injured. And that won't, put a damper on her career or put her sidelines or anything. But Moné retains. Not at all surprised about that. The match, again, I wasn't really watching a lot of this because, again, I was busy doing a lot of other things. And to be perfectly honest, this was one of those matches that I really just didn't care about. I've not really been loving a lot of what Mercedes has been doing. And whenever I give it 100% of my attention, that opinion doesn't change. So I assumed that it wasn't going to be the case here. And I highly doubt that anybody's going to say, well, if you weren't absolutely loving everything that she had done before, this is the match that would change your mind about it. From what I did see, it seemed just as fine as the other matches that she's had. Take it or leave it, good or bad, whatever. To me, when I've got 2 to 3 hours of Raw, and I've got 2 hours of NXT, and I've got 2 hours of Dynamite, and 3 hours of SmackDown, and an hour of LFG, and a 7-hour pay-per-view, and I do podcasts about wrestling, and I write up articles about pro wrestling and all this, eventually I'm just like, I'm tapped out. And that's one of the downsides of pay-per-views being on the weekend, where it ends up being like, all right, it's Sunday night. I wish it wasn't Sunday. I wish it was Saturday, and I had a whole extra day of a weekend for me, where it wasn't just, it's 6 o'clock. I guess I'm working the whole rest of the night, but whatever. Even still, like when I always make the argument that like working in pro wrestling in this capacity is a damper in the sense of, hey, like I couldn't watch Paige and MJF because I was writing about it. I still think when it comes to just the fandom side, if you were to tell me, for instance, hey, you're going to make, I don't even know how much money I would need to be able to do this, but like, let's say an astronomical number. We're going to give you $1 million a month and you don't have to work anymore. They're fucking amazing. Where I wouldn't have to be writing up news reports. I wouldn't. Like why nobody would be like, oh, I'm a millionaire. I mean, $12 million a year in that scenario. And you wouldn't continue to still do your job the way that you normally would. You would want to be doing the fun things. So I'd be doing the podcast and I'd be doing this stuff here and there as a fan. But as a fan, I still don't think I would set this much time to watch pro wrestling, and I would skip over matches as well, just because maybe during that time I would rather watch the Harley Quinn episode from this week. And, it's a fun episode and everything. I like that. Or catch up on a different thing or something like that. So I think even in that scenario, I probably wouldn't just be super into this Watanabe and Mercedes match, but is what it is. Now, I did get to see everything from that point onward, and Swerve Strickland beats Ricochet. He is the new number one contender. We'll come back around to that a little bit later on. During the match, at one point, though, I was getting a little bit annoyed because I was like, oh my God, why is Prince Nana not just, try to say that real fast, Prince Nana not just going over and grabbing the robe? It's ringside. Ricochet is busy in a match. All he needs to do is just go over and grab it, and then at least one of their goals is accomplished. Because maybe Swerve doesn't win the match and he doesn't become the number one contender, but at least Nana's got his robe back. And right after I reached the point where I was like, this is ridiculous. Why isn't he going over and doing that? That's when he went over and did it. Of course, it ends up getting taken back by Ricochet. And long story short, comes back around. Swerve gets 2 house calls at a big pressure, scores the win, gives the robe back to Nana. All things are well. Nana's got his robe back. Swerve is number one contender. Ricochet's been put down. I'm sure he'll still be laughing about it and, being cocky and everything going forward, because this heel character is definitely helping him quite a bit. A good match, though. I like that one. Kazuchika Okada retains the AEW Continental Championship over Brody King. I wasn't as big on this match as Swerve and Ricochet. I actually saw some people online saying that it was incredibly bland. Seeing some responses of like, that's it. That's all this match was, etc. Of course, I've seen, everybody's reactions are different. So some people being like, oh my God, Okada retains in one of the best matches ever and all. Seemed just fine to me. Didn't seem like it was super special. But Okada retaining, not at all surprising. King just kind of came out of nowhere to me when it comes to this. And we'll, again, put a pin in this discussion, talk about it a little bit later too. The Hurt Syndicate retained the tag titles over the Outrunners. Again, not at all surprising. I believe the comment from Nigel McGuinness was, if the Outrunners win, then he'll do Collision in his underwear for commentary. So he's not going to do that because, of course, the Outrunners did not end up winning the titles here. They put up more of a fight than I thought that they were going to, though, here and there. So credit to them when it comes to that. But Hurt Syndicate were obviously going to retain. They went ahead and did. Things went in a better direction, I think, for like overall match quality in the next one. Timeless Toni Storm retaining the AEW Women's World Championship over Mariah May in their Falls Count Anywhere Hollywood ending match. Now, you've been hearing me for the past, I don't know how many months, talk about how I'm not interested in this feud and how this is like, I get why people love it, but it's not working for me. I still have to give credit where credit's due. They put on a hell of a match here. They beat the shit out of each other. This felt like a true finale for this whole thing. It was a spectacle, and it was a car crash in some ways, but that's kind of, third act in a movie. All the craziness goes down, and look at Return of the Jedi. That's where like most of the battles happen in the Star Wars franchise. So it's not at all surprising that that's the case. I am surprised, though, how much I enjoyed it. And I am always going to be telling the truth when it comes to things on this podcast. I never lie on this podcast at all. So that also comes in when it comes to me saying that something I haven't been enjoying turns around and goes in a better direction. I'll call it the Pizza Hut theory all the time because I might have mentioned this in the past before, but a testament to how honest I am is always when I was younger, there's multiple different Pizza Huts in my area, and one of them was better than the other ones. And I kept saying despite it being a chain restaurant, there are differences between them. And my mom tried to fool me by saying that she was getting stuff from the one that wasn't as good, went to the better one. And I was like, oh man, this is so much better than normal. She's like, God damn it. Okay, you were telling the truth. The Pizza Hut theory holds up all the time when it comes to that. I'm never going to lie and act like I didn't like something when I did. So despite me saying that the Toni Storm and Mariah May feud has not been hitting me as well as it has with other people, this match I am very high on. I thought it was very, very good. Thank you, Ashton, for the super chat. MJF Page, Swerve Ricochet, Steel Cage, Toni May, Crazy, for all those. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't say the MJF Page I mentioned before, but Swerve Ricochet, the Steel Cage match. This Falls Count Anywhere match was super bloody. They had a couple different spots here and there, like, you know, a Storm Zero and the steel steps, and they had what was it? It was the table at the beginning of it where it was a choke bomb, I think, where Storm choke bombed Mariah May off the stage onto a table. So that was a cool moment too. And of course, it all makes a huge step forward when Storm brings out a bucket and it's got a champagne bottle in it. It's broken. There's broken glass all over it. And they start using the glass. The glass is spread out on the ring. Storm has like her taped up wrists covered in this glass and, you know, punches Mariah May with that. So they both end up a bloody mess. Storm Zero threw this Hollywood ending table for the win around the stage. And yeah, thumbs up all the way for this for sure. Big fan of this. Another really good match followed that one. Konosuke Takeshita going up against Kenny Omega, and Omega wins the AEW International Championship. Another bad night for the Don Callis family. You know, Brian Cage and Lance Archer didn't do anything, and then the next thing up is Takeshita losing his championship. So Omega has won now 3 different championships in AEW. He's been a tag team champion, a world champion, and the international champion. And I think even more so, this spells the future for that whole idea about unifying these titles. Okada retains, as we expected. Omega wins. And I think we are going to get AEW International Champion Kenny Omega versus AEW Continental Champion Kazuchika Okada at AEW All In Texas. I am going to be very shocked if that's not the direction that they go, and if like Omega drops his title beforehand, or Okada does, or it ends up being a match where it's like not both titles are on the line or something. I'm fully expecting a title unification. Now, they could end up going with the Intercontinental Championship and going in that direction. They could end up just having whoever wins that hold both championships and just like carry 2 belts around, because they've done plenty title unifications where the belts didn't actually merge. You know, the ROH 6-man tag titles and the trios titles and everything like that. But I do think we're going in that direction. And of course, when it comes down to July 12th, I think, 12th? Something around those lines. When it comes around to that, we'll have more information. We'll talk about that in the future and give our thoughts. If you want to go back in time and see my thoughts from immediately after Revolution, I am hoping that this ends up going towards Okada. I think that Okada beating Omega helps Okada more than what the benefit would be if Omega were to beat Okada. But it could very easily just go in the other direction, and it might end up being more in line with that. I don't know. We got a couple of months. I added the steel cage match between Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher down to my match of the year list. This was my most favorite match of the night. I thought that they somehow managed to have almost as bloody, if not even a little bit bloodier, of a match than Mariah May and Toni Storm did, which was like they had glass in their match, and the steel cage shouldn't necessarily be that way when it comes to Fletcher and Ospreay, but we got thumbtacks in there, and they ended up beating the living shit out of each other. to the point that I also wrote down one of the best moves or spots or whatever that's probably going to be throughout this whole year was the Spanish fly off the top of the steel cage. They land on the thumbtacks. And, I say this every single time, and I think it every single time, whether it's the glass in the ring or it's the thumbtacks, I feel so bad for the referees because they have to count these pinfalls. They have to lean down and check to see if somebody's submitting or something. So they always are in a situation where I forget the referee's name that was in for this one, but he goes and he's counting a pinfall or whatever. Then you have to see him getting up and he's dancing because he's clearly kneed on top of rested his knees on top of a thumbtack or something. And yeah, it's gotta suck so bad because you don't get any credit for it at all. You're slapping your hand down on the mat and just basically slamming it down onto some thumbtacks, and nobody pays any attention to this. So they end up getting checked out after the match and being I've got all these puncture holes, and nobody gives a shit. So that sucks for them. But Ospreay beats Fletcher in a hell of a match. It's going to be kind of hard to top this for a match of the year candidate for me, I think. But I am always willing to see more and more stuff on this par and better things and all, because why not? I want everything to be the most amazing thing ever. And you should too. I mean, just because the first bite of pizza tastes the best doesn't mean that the second bite shouldn't taste just as much, if not better. So great match. And that led to the main event, Jon Moxley against Cope for the AEW World Championship. The ending of the match, Jon Moxley retains over Cope, but not by beating Cope. He beats Christian Cage. Now, Christian had won this Money in the Bank style cash-in title opportunity thing several months ago, and he's teased cashing in multiple different times, as one does when they're holding some kind of a call your shot gauntlet thing, or anything that works in that same kind of realm. So he actually signed the paper. He fully cashed in during this match. That point, it becomes official. So there was a part of me when that happened for a moment that I was like, oh, is this how they get around it? Because this Death Rider story, it's not just me who hasn't been loving it. Plenty other people are not as big of a fan of it. So I was actually thinking oh man, maybe this is their means of kind of ending this and not having Moxley lose, because if he doesn't take the pin and Copeland ends up taking the pin instead, then you can get Copeland and Christian going forward, and Moxley can, just beat people up or whatever it might be. I thought that was going to be the case for, I bet if I timed myself, it would have been something around 45 seconds. And then it started to dawn on me, no, this is just Cage is going to be the one that loses. And lo and behold, that's what ends up happening. Moxley gets his bulldog choke in on Cage. Cage is the one that passes out. So submission victory for the win for Jon Moxley to retain. Now, a noteworthy thing that happened during the match for anybody that missed this is Switchblade Jay White came out. He tried to help out Cope. He ended up hitting Cope instead. So that might lead to a feud going forward. If they do, that's one of the stupid things that I hate about pro wrestling, because anybody in that scenario would look back on the footage and go, well, he didn't plan on hitting me. And you could be mad that he hit you and that he didn't have more self-control. But for that to suddenly become, now my big focal point is going after my friend and not going after the guy that I have this bitter blood rivalry kind of thing over with, then that never really makes any sense to me. But they could go in that direction. Or Cage and Cope can continue the feud going forward too, or something. They could spin this in multiple different ways, but because Swerve Strickland had won the number one contendership, I do think that they are over Cope and Moxley unless they're going to continue it in a way to just kill some time. Now, AEW Dynasty is not that far around the corner, so it's not as though they need to wait 7 weeks like WrestleMania is, where WWE needs to just kill some time. They can get away with just moving on to Moxley versus Swerve, and then Cope can do whatever he's going to do with Jay White or with Cope, with Cage. I keep wanting. Cope and Cage and Christian Cage and Adam Page and Ethan Page. It drives me crazy. But the way that this show ended was Swerve taking out Moxley. So that gives me more of an indication that they are just going to pivot. They're just going to go, okay, well, moving on. We got Strickland versus Cope. Why do I keep saying that? Strickland versus Moxley. And Cope either continues to hang around with the Death Rider story as just like not the focal point anymore, or he moves on to something else. Can't say that I disagree with the decision to keep it on Moxley rather than to give it to Cope, because I don't think that Cope winning the title right now would have made any sense. Not that I love this belt still being on Moxley, but think about it this way. Cope beating Moxley and then defending against Swerve. And that was like the whole thing that this Death Riders angle built up to, was just Christian coming in and then Cope beating Christian. Like, that wouldn't have made any sense to me, So all in all, I thought this was a pretty damn good pay-per-view. And I thought it was filled with a lot of really solid to very good matches. I think that there are moments throughout this that are going to be very clippable moments that you can show people going forward. You can show them footage of like the Storm and Mariah May match. You can get them potentially hooked on watching something with like some of the moves from the Ospreay and Fletcher match. They did some stuff storyline wise to move things forward. They kept some storylines continuing in a way that I think is decent enough. Like the Bandito thing. Jericho could have just retained over Gravity and it could have been some boring ass match, but the whole stealing the luchador mask thing, okay, that gives it a little bit of an adrenaline shot. So I liked it. And this is, as I said before, going on my list for potential best pay-per-view of the year. Rob had mentioned before, but the idea of that he enjoys Revolution, usually one of the most entertaining pay-per-views of the year in his mind. So I'm sure that Rob agrees on that front. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he hated it. And I'm sure that Callum, based off of what Callum likes, I'm sure that Callum really enjoyed a good portion of this too. So I'll try to get their opinions looped into here sometime very soon. If not, then you guys could always hit them up at Dude Felice and at Wigmeister14 on X and elsewhere. So if you want to just like flat out ask them and follow them there, go ahead and check that stuff out. Make sure that you are also following everything that I've got going on under a mango tree, everything on fanboysanonymous.com, everything on smarkoutmoment.com, and all the other side projects and everything. You never really know exactly what I'm working on, because I never really know exactly what I'm working on. And of course, I have so many things on the back burner, especially when it comes to Fanboys Anonymous, but I want to do significantly more with all those things. And the more support that you show me, the more that I'm able to do that. Make sure that you are following all of the different things you can find on the link tree at amangotree.com, and you will see the links to the Smark Out Moment stuff and the Fanboys Anonymous stuff and my personal stuff at Toni Mango, things like my Letterboxd and, all sorts of varieties of different things. Stay tuned for an upcoming post from What Culture about something that we actually had talked about before on the podcast, which was the idea, what if WrestleMania was always 2 nights? What would have been the main event? And I kind of continue that discussion a little bit and actually toss out a couple other ideas from some different things that we had talked about before. So not every answer is the exact same as when we did that podcast. So I recommend check that out. That's going to be published. Actually, I don't know exactly when that's going to be published. It's going to be published pretty soon, I'm assuming. It's in the bank, so it's all going to depend on when the best scheduling is for that. I don't have any say in the best scheduling when it comes to What Culture, so it's pending right now. So stay tuned for that one. And of course, follow me all over the place on these different things, and make sure that you are staying tuned for other podcasts coming your way this week. We don't have a game plan right now of exactly what the main event is going to be and what other things are going to be recorded over this week, except for obviously the hot tags coming up on Friday or Thursday night or whatever we record that. But we have a couple blank weeks. So now is the time before we get into WrestleMania season, where we need to do a bunch of WrestleMania content, that we need to start talking about some other things. And, if you have any suggestions of what you want us to do, then let me know, because I will always factor that in. We'll always be able to kind of play around with a couple ideas. I think we have like 3 weeks worth of blank weeks before we get into AEW Dynasty. So if you want something like a Superstar Scores or a fan announce table of something, or whatever it might be, maybe a brand new concept, if you have something in mind, pick your poison is the best way to make sure that we do that 100%. But also just leave your comments and tell us hey, it'd be fun if you guys did this or that or that. Sometimes I end up not thinking of anything, and then it ends up being whoever suggests the first thing. And then I end up going, cool, that's an idea. And then we go and we move on to that. So I don't know when we will record that and whatever it is. So you have to stay tuned and subscribe to Smark Out Moment on YouTube and elsewhere, and then find out when it gets posted. So check back other episodes in the meantime. Stay tuned for all of that. And keep checking smarkoutmoment.com. But until the next time I'm around here, adios. This has been another Smark Out Moment, and I'm being counted out.